Well, hello there and welcome to the kitchen of the dollhouse. And what are we cooking up today? Well, my friends, another reading from The Secret Language of Birthdays by Gary Goldschneider and Hugh Stelfers for February 1st, the day of willfulness. That's right. And here at the top of the page is a visual representational image of the day of willfulness. We have us an image of, what do we have here? Well, a gathering of brooms, it would seem. That's right. More than one, unless there's another word for that. All right. That having been said, is that a adequate representational image for the day of willfulness? Who's to say? Very random image, to be sure. But that having been said, not altogether all too important. But what is important is it's February 1st, and hence it's somebody's birthday. And so if it's your birthday, I just want to say happy birthday. That's what's important around here. A heartfelt happy birthday. But if this video finds you late, I don't know, days, weeks, months, whatever the case may happen to be, well, I just want to say I hope you had a happy birthday in that instance. But for everybody else who's joining us today, either randomly out of curiosity or more importantly to celebrate the February 1st birthday, I just want to say hello, welcome, and I hope you enjoy yourself. Now, before I dive in with the redirect, something I like to take a moment to do, and that is roll some dice. That's right. This is the DykASSt birthday broadcast, so I like to live up to the namesake, but I do so more importantly for synchronicity's sake. And here I rolled a 6 and a 4 for a 10. Now, what is synchronicity, you're probably wondering? Well, my friends, as I've heard it told, the universe will put things into our path so that we can manifest our goals or realize our aspirations. Kind of help us do so, if you like. But a lot of times we're very laser or singular of focus as we get on with our lives, you know, the commute to work or say running errands. And so we ostensibly have the blinders on to the things that are put down in our path. And so this is a little bit of an exercise to help us take off those blinders, start recognizing the things the universe is putting in our path. And how do we do that? Well, we look for a sign that we can't help but notice. That's right. Your daily numbers, something agreed upon between you and the universe. That said, you don't have to go with the numbers I rolled for you, but it's probably advisable you take your own set of dice so that you can get out into the world and, you know, ascribe directional values to number sets and time limits with which to go in those directions, if this is something that you would like to try out. That said, pick a particular spot near and dear to your heart, or just an area in town that you maybe haven't gotten out into before to kind of try out this exercise. That said, you find your place. Like I said, get the blinders off. You want to start soaking up everything around you like a sponge, because you never know, the day might start to take on a theme. There might be things that start presenting into your path or into your life that, hey, you would otherwise kind of ignore. That's right, like your numbers, for instance. But let's take the visual representational image as an example to my point. Maybe you start seeing brooms everywhere, right? People carrying them around randomly. People always sweeping outside of the places of business you may walk past. Or, hey, maybe even in an advertisement that you might see pass you on the side of a bus or something like that. Or perhaps a billboard with a broom in it. Just things like that. I take it as an example to show you that the universe is with you on your path. It's just showing you in very, maybe not necessarily unique or clear terms or things that are noticeable, but they're there for you to notice if you're there to pick up on them. So that said, you get your first directional value and time limit established, you head off, and you know what, maybe at the end of it, you don't notice anything in particular. You didn't pick up anything random presenting, and no numbers to speak of. Well, in that instance, just stop, collect yourself, be open to things happening, right? And like I said, be noticing smaller things. Maybe you just so happen to notice, as I often like to say, you might just happen to be on Old 10th Avenue there. You see the street sign and, oh, hey, there's one of my numbers. There you go. There's a sign that you're on the right path. So once again, roll yourself a time value, directional value, and head off. Maybe at the end of this particular leg, I don't know, maybe the old number 10 bus pulls up. Well, you know what? That's a sign if ever I did see. So, and maybe you just so happen to have perfect change in your pocket to ride. So, you know what? Get on the bus, I would say, even if you don't necessarily like to ride. And maybe roll yourself a time value so you know how long to be on this thing so you can get off immediately, right? That being said, maybe as soon as you roll your dice, let's just say the number 10 pops up again, and you look up, and what's this? Somebody's wearing a sports jersey with the number 10 on it. I often like to use this example because it gives us an opportunity to talk about following people, maybe a white rabbit of sorts. You know what? Maybe stay on the bus until that person decides to depart, and then roll yourself a time value to see how long to follow them. Maybe they're going to lead you somewhere the universe wants you to see. And in some cases, these people might spy you following them. Well, you know what? If that happens to be the case, don't let it become a thing. Be very transparent about what you're doing. Show them your dice. Maybe show them this video. And as I often like to say, you might just find out it's their birthday too. All right? Things like that can happen. It sounds strange, but you know what? It's not that crazy. All right? And if it's their birthday too, they might just say, you know what? I'm not really doing anything. How about I join you on this thing? See how many other more brooms we can find, right? Stack up some synchronicities and some coincidences, if you like, because I think by and large they're interchangeable. And it's just like you can look at it as a magical thing kind of happening, all right? But you know what? Maybe you say, hey, where were you going? You know, let's not just follow the dice. Where were you headed off to, all right? And it's like, you know what? I was headed to the hardware store. Well, let's see what we see there, all right? That's where you were headed. Let's see what we get. And you know what? Maybe they have brooms on special right there out in front of the front door. I know, you're probably saying to yourself it's coincidence, but hey, you know what? Don't poo-poo it too much. In any event, I think you get the idea. So get out there, stack up the coincidences, you know what? And let the universe show you it's with you on your path. At the very least, at least you're getting out of the house and getting your steps in, even if you don't see any of that happening. That said, let's get on with the birthday read. Your month is February, your day is the 1st, your sign is 11 to 13 degrees, Aquarius of the Aquarius II period specifically, and your quality and element is fixed air. All right, February 1st, the day of willfulness. February 1 people are first and foremost distinguished by their strong, earthy, but mental nature. Not content with abstract speculations, those born on this day must impress their ideas on the minds of those around them. Headstrong, willful, and courageous, they know when they are in the right and will not give an inch. And their mental preparation for most circumstances is thorough, and they have a facile improvisatory flair, and they are able to avoid compromising situations and sidestep any issues which they would rather not discuss. Thus, they can make a formidable opponent. And a February 1 person is characteristically energetic and youthful, but often petulant like a child as well. Emotional problems can plague February 1 people, particularly in their younger years. Their feelings are often scattered, impulsive, and uncontrollable, and thus land them in trouble repeatedly. And there seems to be a great divide between their mental solidity, I was going to say solidarity, but their mental solidity and their emotional vulnerability, so that at times they are like two different individuals. And until they bring their great willpower to bear on their own inner processes, come to grips with their personal problems, and begin to understand themselves, their lives will continue to be in turmoil. More highly evolved February 1 individuals eventually integrate their many-sided talents into a well-functioning, polished persona. But this takes time. And until they do, their careers may be highly unstable, and they are apt to flounder. Others may watch them in confusion or bemusement and wonder why they haven't succeeded in doing more, despite their ambition. In addition to their mental and emotional makeup, the sensuous physical side of February 1 people cries out to be fed. And this may cause additional problems if it is operating out of control. Of the qualities mentioned in their personality hierarchy, the mental usually comes first, the sensuous second, and the emotional third. The fourth important area, too often neglected, it says in parentheticals, is that of intuition, which should be cultivated and relied on more, as it can be the important cementing bond which pulls it all together for these talented but tumultuous individuals. Part of the problem is that the power of reason and logic is so highly developed in February 1 people that it can crowd out their intuitive side. And when reason at times breaks down, they tend to tumble into into the feeling rather, and physical realms, often resulting in emotional outbursts or self-indulgence. And for February 1 people, it is not so much self-control that is wanted, but self-understanding. And above all, personality. I don't know why I couldn't read that. And above all, personality integration. That's right. Though sometimes obscured by their focus on matters at hand, being a whole and deeply feeling human being is the highest and most important aim for those born on this day, and ultimately takes them far beyond where mental drive and determination alone can. Well, all right. Despite my inability to read the word personality, is quite an interesting birthday breakdown, to be sure. And what is very interesting about this, I'll get into here shortly. That having been said, I'd like to provide a little bit of a commentary on the day, if you like. Point out what I find interesting, also something that might connect to other days. So let's dive into some notes. All right. February 1, the day of willfulness. Your individuals distinguished by your strong earthy but mental nature. And you may not be content, the reading claims, with abstract personal speculation. You may have to have a pressing need to convey your ideas to those around you. You're said to be headstrong, willful, courageous, and you know when you're right. And you're committed to your convictions. And perhaps the most important reality in all of that, but it goes unmentioned, is that you must then know when you're wrong also. All right, and I don't necessarily have an argument for why that may be more important, but I'm just going by my impulse because I feel it in my bones that there's some kind of relevance to that. What else do we have here? As to your mental nature, the reading claims that you have a penchant for preparation, and it's wide sweeping, or it's facile here also, or to be defined out, because I didn't know what facile meant, is it's achieved with little difficulty. All right, and it has an improvised nature, and interestingly, you have an ability to both avoid compromising situations and evade topics that you would rather not discuss. All right, which is interesting to me, as it's such a random ability to pick up on in somebody. But it must be especially noticeable if it's then ascribed to you here in the breakdown. That said, the various ingredients that go into realizing these abilities, at least in their final forms, are also said to cause you no uncertain amount of difficulty in your formative years. And then when coupled with mention of a divide that's said to exist between your mental acuity and your emotions, the reading claims it may be quite the process to understand about yourself. Despite such obstacles, however, the more highly evolved person born on this day is said to do just that. All right, you persist through the time it takes to synthesize yourself and your abilities into a formidable individual, rather than flounder on an unstable turmoil, regardless your ambition. And it seems to be a little bit of a through line here with the Aquarius II period. And yesterday was the first day of it, but here it seems to be continuing on with a little bit of a through line here. So you're not alone in that particular respect. Let's see, what else do we have here? You're also said to have a sensuous side of your personality that presents challenges insofar as it must be satiated there in its need, but also a kind of intuition that may go unnoticed due to your rational side, but which merits cultivation, the reading claimed, as it may be the key to reconciling this gulf or the disconnects in your nature. Ostensibly the ones that are keeping you from realizing your higher self or your more evolved final form there. For a very in-depth analysis that almost reads like a roadmap. It's a very interesting breakdown to be sure. Now, that being said, that's what I'd say about your breakdown. Let's move on to your numbers and your planets. All right, those born on the first of the month are ruled by the number 1 and the sun. And those born on the first usually like to be first and are of a definite viewpoint and eager to rise to the top. The sun symbolizes strong creative energy as well as fire, which should be kept flowing steadily rather than allowed to flare out of control. And when coupled with Uranus, the ruler of Aquarius, the sun's power influences can become restless and electric, making February 1 people high-strung and confused. Also, too much rejection in early and middle life can cause them to grow cold and aloof. Very interesting, very interesting. This was a pretty personalized numbers and planets day. I don't know that we've had a day where the sun was also co-ruled with Uranus. We might have had a couple of them, but just not to what I can recall. So in any event, I said this was a highly interesting birthday breakdown for a very specific reason. And so let's get into why that is here with your numbers and your planets. So the number 1 in the sun for traits of a definite viewpoint, as they said, and an eager desire to rise to the top and always be first. And symbolism associated with strong creative energy and fire, which, much like your pressing drive and ambition conveyed in the breakdown, is suggested to be kept burning steady instead of allowed to flare out. Much the way, say, an oxyacetylene torch has to have the gas dialed in just right, or else it'll pop, and then you got to start the process all over again, right? The planet Uranus, with its erratic and explosive energy, conveys a penchant for shaking up and electrifying the planets that it co-rules with, all right? A lot of times changing positive energy into negative, vice versa. Just really shaking up the dynamic there from what it's usually kind of purposed to be realized as. You're also said in this respect to be high-strung and have a confused nature to some extent. So it sounds like you can blame Uranus for most of your frustrations if you decide to lean in on the astrology angle there. But most interesting, like I led off here, to me, is that this is a sun-ruled day. And typically sun-ruled days are very hyper-focused to the extent that the theme of the day runs through the whole thing. And here it did that by and large, but I would say that they expanded out so much to really round out your personality and what it constitutes and things that are going on inside there. And in a lot of cases, I don't think they really do that the way that they did here. It sounds exactly like I described, but there's something missing. These days are so much more focused on the theme than this seemed to be. I mean, willfulness is a pretty broad, sweeping term, but I don't know. You have to kind of dive back into other sun rule days to kind of say to kind of see what I'm talking about here. And I'm totally deviating from the copy here, but let's see if I can dive back in. Expands out, relates to the various assets of your life, like I said. So there is a hyper focus to be sure, but it's as well rounded out as a sun ruled day as I've ever seen. So just go back to January 28th, all right, to see what I mean. That day was the probably the pinnacle of what I'm trying to explain, because they went in and they examined like 4 different personality types that belonged to that particular day and how it lines up with that theme. And they didn't really expand out about the personality outside of that. So it was a pretty myopic day, to be sure. And here I would say that wasn't really the case, even though it was very focused. So that's why I think it's interesting, because they just rounded it out within that particularly narrow scope. And that's largely lacking, if you weren't picking up that, me having said that 9 times already. That said, don't allow rejection to let yourself grow cold or emotionally indifferent. I think they said that here at the very end of it there. And that's what aloof means. I had to look it up. Emotionally indifferent. So a huge, particularly interesting numbers and planets entry to be sure. So that having been said, that's your numbers and planets. Let's move on to your tarot. That's right, your tarot. One of the more eclectic of the New Age metaphysical ideologies, if you like. But we don't have to take it home with us to start dealing out the cards to inspire every whim and flight of fancy. We just leave it in a book when we're done here, all right? And sometimes it gives us a kind of more insight and more context into the things that they've brought up in the breakdown. But sometimes not. And in any event, let's dive into it, see what we can see. The first card of the major arcana is the Magician, who symbolizes intellect, communication, information, as well as magic, naturally. All right. And over his head is an infinity symbol, which in some tarot decks takes the form of a hat and in others a halo. Many interpretations may be drawn, one of which is that the magician recognizes the cyclical and unending nature of life and is empowered by this understanding. The positive traits suggested by this first card include diplomatic skill and shrewdness, but negatively a lack of scruples and opportunism. You know, I've been taken to kind of saying here that they only ever impart one of the interpretations of the Magician card, even though they say there are many. And once again, they only conveyed that one particular interpretation, which I find kind of comical. But that having been said, we'll go with it, all right? What I have to say here. The Magician for recognizing the cyclical nature of life and drawing power from that knowledge. And they derive the traits of diplomatic skill, clever awareness in practical matters, shrewdness if you like, but negative is scruples and opportunism, as the reading said. Now, I don't know if this is the most apt card on its face, all right? But I do see certain sweeping understanding of life if you have to recognize and synthesize so many traits to understand yourself, all right? I would say you have to start to understand life in order to do that. Especially if you're going to eventually flourish where you would otherwise be floundering. You have to kind of see what life is all about to finally get to that place. So I think it would probably apply in those terms. But to wit, diplomacy and cunning would certainly factor into as much as well. You're going to have to kind of bob and weave and shake and dash in order to get to that higher evolved thing. And that might require some of the positives that were mentioned. But yes, as follows too, you might find yourself negatively taking advantage of people for your own ends, right? Or implying immoral means to realize such ends. So yeah, mind those negatives as well, at least in a general sense, right? Because what did they say? They said lack of scruples and opportunism. That's right. You might do some otherwise unsavory things to meet your eventual ends there. So that having been said, that is your tarot card. I don't know if we got a lot of context, but we were able to kind of suss some things out and kind of lend more credence to finding that higher evolved state, right? So that being said, that's your tarot. Let's move on to your health. All right. Those born on February 1 will generally experience many problems in their emotional life. Their intense emotions lead them into involvements from which it can be difficult or impossible to extricate themselves. These bright and quick individuals have to beware of using physical, sensual, and sexual activities as a way of turning off their brains, essentially addictive and potentially damaging behavior. Moderate, regular physical exercise, to say aerobics, jogging, and swimming, is highly recommended. February 1 diets should shun excess sugar and the use of tobacco, which, though perhaps calming in the short term, only makes them more nervous in the long run. Grains, fresh vegetables, breads, hearty soups, and stews are staple foods and work to keep them grounded. All right. Pretty interesting health entry here today. I know I've probably said everything's interesting, but the past few days there have been some disconnects with a couple of these things. So I don't know. It's interesting in that regard, but you know what? Otherwise, not interesting. So, but in any event, hey, let's dive into the health. What I have to say about it. You may experience emotional problems, which is also a seeming through line here for Aquarius writ large, but more specifically with Aquarius II, as it turns out. Even though it's the early days, so that might change. This proclivity of indulgence as an escape, that's a new entry for the Aquarius individuals, though. So maybe strike a balance, it sounds like, okay? Or find some moderation to that end, all right? They also said moderate exercise and a diet with stable grounding foods. Now, that has come up a bit in the past, in addition to heart-healthy choices for your diet. Now, I know they didn't mention that, but the circulatory system is an Aquarius body area. So there was one day where they mentioned kind of cutting out red meat. So that lends me to think, hey, you got to be mindful of your heart there if the circulatory system is a body area. It came up the last zodiac period, the Capricorn. One of their body areas was the veins, and so they were told to cut out animal fats and dairy fats, ostensibly for concerns about cholesterol. So maybe be mindful of that as well, the veins being part of the circulatory system. But also mind your ankles and your lower legs to that end, because that's another Aquarius body area. Also, that being said, with your circulatory system, be mindful of stroke and embolism. So I've been suggesting to get yourself some compression socks. Now you've covered both bases, right? So there you go. So they did kind of a deep dive into tobacco, notably. A lot of times they just say to avoid tobacco or nicotine. No real context to as much. But they say it may affect you in a very novel way. So make you more nervous, even though you might calm you down a little bit in the short term. So kind of interesting that they provided context to that extent, because normally they don't. So in any event, that's been your health. Let's move on to some advice. All right. Cultivate your intuitive powers, all right? They are a natural resource. Try to be more patient and contemplative. But don't be too anxious to please lovers, it says. Be your own boss. And you know what? I think lovers might be a typo. I didn't realize it till just now. We'll get into why here in a second. But with your advice, I had to write it down in a book, so please bear with me. I had to write it all tiny so it would fit. All right, they said cultivate your intuition. All right, they said it is the key to your life's roadmap. All right, so at least try it out. Okay, however that is done. How do you cultivate intuition? Just lead with your first instinct, I suppose. Let's see here. Cultivate patience and contemplation. That's what they said, and I said you have the mental powers, all right, at least according to the breakdown. So put them toward maybe your own self-awareness, I'm assuming, all right? Why not? Why not cultivate yourself? Contemplate on what you're doing, maybe not just what's going on in the world or life in general. So what else did they have to say? Don't be anxious to please lovers. As, you know, we're going by what they wrote. And here's what I wrote about that here before I realized it could be a typo. I must have missed where this came up or was an ultimate concern, all right? On its face being but let's go with it. On its face, though, being too overeager may have negative effects, all right? I don't know for sure, but play it cool. Maybe that's the suggestion there. But if you take it to mean don't be too anxious with others, hey, you know what? You might be getting a little too emotional with folks there, and then, you know, things are getting a little out of order. I think that might apply a little bit better to what we went over in the breakdown. But they also said in the health, so maybe this applies to it, that you will use sensual and sexual activities as a way to escape things. So, yeah, maybe you're too eager to please in that respect, and then that could have negative connotations as being too addictive. So maybe they did cover as much, and it wasn't a typo. So let's lean into them, knowing what they're talking about, and maybe it's with the lovers there. So, but in any event, hey, there's other things to think about. That's always a plus. What else did they have to say? Be your own boss. All right. Just understand that there are a whole host of unique anxieties associated with that endeavor, all right? But I would say something to take from that is that the personal fulfillment in being your own boss, it might trump all of that. So also, I didn't know really where they came up with this one either. So I must have breezed over something or didn't take something they had to say that was maybe buried in between the lines from it. But hey, you know what? Interesting thing to come up anyway. So that being said, that's your advice. So let's move on to your meditation. That's right. It's your birthday. You get a meditation. Something to reflect upon if you like. All right, here we go. The mind not only comes with a personal computer, but also a modem for connecting with the rest of the universe. All right, hey, don't typically read the meditation, so I don't know what to make of it. But once more, the mind not only comes with a personal computer, but also a modem for connecting with the rest of the universe. All right. That's your meditation. It's your birthday. I'm not going to try to figure it out for you or throw some interpretation or spin on it. That's just for you. It kind of defeat the purpose if I did, right? Because it is a meditation. All right. So your meditation in the can, as it were. Let's move on to your strengths and your weaknesses. That's right. Let's hold up the objective mirror and see where you got the strength there and where you might be otherwise a little more atrophied. All right. Your strengths. You're strong-willed, you're mentally quick, but you're grounded. All right, but your weaknesses. Oh, let's take up the objective mirror again to flip it to the side that blows up your face there. Maybe shows off the things you're otherwise insecure about on a superficial level within the metaphor there. All right, your weaknesses. You're stubborn, overly rational, and self-unaware. Interesting, you know what? This one kind of came up yesterday also. Must be an Aquarius II thing. The stubbornness, I mean. That having been said, you know what? Strong-willed came up there too. But that being said, I often like to argue that with our weaknesses, they can sometimes be strengths. It just depends on the situation and the individual. I remember some time back, the strength came up as impulsive, but then the next day it traded to a weakness. And so I was thinking, like, well, what's the disconnect there? Especially on such a proximal day. But hey, you know what? It just depends on the person. That being said, I also like to argue that your strengths are going to help you beat back your weaknesses or improve upon them, all right? So let's see if I can strike up an argument with your strengths and weaknesses specifically. I've been failing to do as much the past few days, but let's give it a shot here. Your strengths, you're strong-willed and you're mentally quick, but you're also grounded. But your weaknesses, you're stubborn, overly rational, and self-unaware. Well, stubborn, let's just see here. I could see that being a strength insofar as you're gonna keep fighting against whatever the problem is until it's done, all right? Overly rational, I don't know how rational is a weakness, but you know what? It could be that you're just talking things to death, and people, even if it is a rational argument, they're not willing to give on it because you're being too stubborn about it, right? Could be. Self-unaware, and you might not be aware you're doing as much. All right, but that said, could those be strengths though? I think it could depend upon the situation, all right? They might throw you into the boardroom and somebody doesn't want to give on the contract. You're going to keep hammering down until they eventually give, all right? But let's say those are weaknesses, right? We want to improve upon them. You're strong-willed. You're going to keep getting after it to a stubborn degree, all right? It's funny how those two are kind of dovetailed into each other, right? Mentally quick. Hey, you know what? You might outsmart yourself to that extent, all right? And grounded. Hey, I think you're going to find a very earthy way of doing as much, all right? Even if you can't be mentally quick to come up and to outsmart yourself. Come at it from a grounded, balanced, and what was the other one? Moderate way of looking at things. Boom, you're going to get over it, I would say. So I think we covered all the bases, even though I was doing it from a myriad of different angles. So maybe I was able to do as much. Hopefully, if anything else, though, you took some value from watching me do it, or you heard something that sparked something. That said, I often like to say your weaknesses, you know what, don't get rid of them altogether, because down deep, they kind of make us who we are. So if you need to improve upon them, work on it, but just in moderate fashion. That's right. So in any event, your strengths and weaknesses having been conveyed, let's move on to those born on this day. And when we get into those born on this day, not only do we get to see who shares your company, which can be interesting, I often like to look at it from the perspective, I say often, I always try to look at it from the perspective of how can it inspire us to chase after our passions. And I bring that up because a lot of times I get out in the world and meet folks and ask them what they do, and more importantly, if they like it. And I've noticed a lot of times they don't. And I think it's just the fact that a lot of folks get out there in the world after school and they got to make the ends meet. So they'll pick up any particular job that they can get into, even if they don't necessarily like what they have to do it, right? And then eventually, hey, they just get used to doing that and they start maybe climbing the corporate ladder. And now they're in a little bit of a rut because they're used to the things that come with that. Maybe they don't have to work so hard anymore. And now their coffers are getting filled ever so more each year. But at the very root, the fatal flaw, has nothing to do with anything they like. Maybe they don't even know what they like, let alone what their passions are. And so I think this is the perfect opportunity to examine that. And maybe we can take some inspiration from those who've come before us, right? And who share our birthday. And you know what? Because if there's anything I can wish for you on your birthday, it's that you're getting after something that you find personally fulfilling. Because there's nothing like having a purpose. So like I said, if there's anything I wish for you on your birthday, it's that. And maybe just hearing these individuals help put the bug in your ear and help you start rekindling the fires for as much, you know, even if you haven't done it before, say. But I think you get the point. Let's dive into it, shall we? We start off with Langston Hughes, the poet, playwright, novelist of Tambourines to Glory fame. We also have Boris Yeltsin, the first popularly elected Russian president. James P. Johnson, an early jazz stride pianist and a composer. We also have John Ford, the master film director, and he was responsible for over 120 features, two of which were Stagecoach and The Grapes of Wrath. We also have Clark Gable, the film actor, Fritjof Capra, Capra says, a physicist and writer of The Tao of Physics. We also have S.J. Perlman, a humor essayist and a playwright, and it also says a Marx Brothers scriptwriter. We also have Emilio Sergei, a Nobel Prize-winning nuclear physicist, and discovered the anti-proton. We also have Hervé Filion, a harness racing driver, 10-time driver of the year, an all-time leader in races won. We also have Sadao Watanabe, a Japanese jazz alto soprano saxophonist, Princess Stephanie of Monaco, and it says survived a 120-foot plunge car crash. We also have John Canaday, a New York Times art critic. We also have Hugo von Hofmannsthal, Austrian poet and a playwright. It doesn't sound like I pronounced it right, but I think I got it pretty close. Victor Herbert, an operetta composer and a cellist, and Rick James, the singer-songwriter, producer. We also have Dawn Everly, a singer of the Everly Brothers, Jessica Savitch, TV journalist and an anchor, Alexander Kipnis, a Russian basso, Kazuhiro Ishii, a Japanese architect, and Claude Francois, a French singer and a composer. And I don't know if I did or not, but it sounded like I might have mispronounced a couple names there. Let's do some butchering on my side to make up for it. It's not done in malice, just hooked on phonics. Doesn't often work for me with the names. So that having been said, I know it's a big ask, tall order, to take inspiration from other people's accomplishments. But like I said, if there's anything I can hope for you on your birthday, it's that you're chasing after as much, all right? Doing figurative or literal backflips out of bed, eager to get into your day and chase after something you find personally fulfilling, all right? But that having been said, those born on this day having been relayed, that essentially rounds out your birthday reading. Except to say your season is winter, your sign once again is Aquarius, of the Aquarius II period specifically, and your quality and element is fixed air. Now what does that mean? That's a different video altogether. I'll leave it at the end if you're interested, but this has been February 1st, the Day of Willfulness, from The Secret Language of Birthdays by Gary Goldschneider and Hugh Stelfers. I have an affiliate link for this book down in the description. if you're interested in picking up a copy and diving in further for yourself, it's got every birthday day in the book there, so you can dive in with other folks, see what their personalities may be like. Makes an incredible coffee table book if you're apt to maybe hold a party and need to get the conversation started, for better or for worse. Hey, it's going to break the ice in an instrumental way. So that having been said, book being relayed, not altogether all too important in the scheme of things. But what's important here, like I said at the top, it's your birthday, and so wishing you a happy birthday. So once again, happy birthday. That's right. But for everybody else who joined us to celebrate, and we're just get your daily numbers and you stayed through to the end because you found it interesting. Hey, I hope you did find it interesting there and you took something of value from it, and that you join us for your birthday read if you haven't before, or if you just want to give it another listen. That's right. But lest I forget, your daily numbers. That's right. 6 and a 4 for a 10. Get out there. Let the universe show you it's with you on your path. Stack up some coincidences or some synchronicities if you like, and let the universe show you it's with you on your path. All right. All that having been relayed, I would just like to say thank you for the pleasure of your time and the privilege of allowing me to share your birthday with you. All right. Take it to heart. I really enjoyed doing this for you. So once again, happy birthday. And take care of yourselves, all right?